Good evening, President Luker, members of the board. As you can see, this is an overwhelming crowd. We weren't expecting this. It's really incredible, the family, how much family support these officers have. And when you hear the background of this call, and for the first time ever, we brought victims of domestic violence, a very violent crime, here with us this evening. And we also want to recognize the second alarmers and other partners in the public safety business. So I just want to give you a little background. As we all know, police officers are called to be peacemakers, and they do not get to choose the call for service. That call for service chooses them. And sometimes that call is to rush into harm's way to save innocent victims. The call I am referring to was on a quiet, peaceful Sunday afternoon in Elkins Park section of our township, when suddenly our officers were dispatched to a violent domestic assault involving multiple victims who had been stabbed with an awl, which is like an ice pick type weapon, edged weapon. At this point, I'm going to ask Lieutenant Porter, we had the permission of one of our victims to play the 911 call that initiated our response.
911, where's your emergency?
I need someone to come to 866 Jacob Road now. My sister's boyfriend is stabbing us and there's a baby in the house.
Okay, what is the address?
866 Jenkintown Road.
What township are you in?
Jenkintown, I think it is, or Abington, I'm not really sure.
Okay, what is he doing?
He stabbed me in the neck. He stabbed her.
He stabbed you with what?
I'm just going to provide you a summary. We had multiple 911 calls coming in simultaneously from various victims. But on March 4th, 2018, Abington police officers were dispatched to 866 Jenkintown Road for a violent domestic assault. Responding units were advised that several victims had been stabbed by a male suspect. Prior to the officers' arrival, Sergeant Kent immediately began to direct the responding officers to specific assignments and continued to ask emergency dispatchers for additional details regarding the location and the condition of our victims and this male suspect. Upon police arrival, one victim was located inside the second alarmers rescue squad, and another was found at McKinley Firehouse. Both victims had been stabbed and had significant injuries. The victims had informed police that the suspect was still inside the residence at 866 Jenkintown Road with yet an additional female victim and 2 young children. Second alarmers, paramedics Rick Reynolds and EMT Russell Bogoli immediately began to treat these victims. The first arriving officers confirmed with one of the victims that the suspect and other victims were still inside the home at 866 Jenkintown Road. Sergeant Kent developed a hasty plan directing officers to set up a perimeter while assembling an entry team consisting of officers Fowl and Petras. Knocks on the door went unanswered, and at one point officers could see that the front shades were moving around the door and believed it to be the suspect. Sergeant Kent made a decision to force entry into the home, and Officer Petras immediately kicked down the front door, creating a safe method for Sergeant Kent and Officer Fowl and others to enter. Once inside, Sergeant Kent immediately observed the suspect at the top of the steps near the dining room, at the top of the basement steps, concealing himself and his right arm and hand. The officer could also hear the voice of a female screaming in the basement, somewhere in the background. Sergeant Kent gave the suspect repeated verbal commands, telling him, "Let me see your hands, let me see your hands. Come on over here, talk to me." The suspect refused these commands and responded by telling the officers with a few expletives that he's holding a hostage before retreating immediately down the basement steps. Very narrow basement steps, I might add. Fearing for the safety of this victim, Sergeant Kent immediately led his officers through the residence and down the narrow basement stairs. While still on the basement steps, Sergeant Kent could see the legs of the victim, one of the victims, who was lying on the basement floor. As Sergeant Kent crouched down, which is a very precarious position to be in, forward on the stairs, he saw the suspect standing over this victim who was still pleading for help. Sergeant Kent again repeated loud verbal commands, instructing the suspect to show his hands. The suspect refused and instead raised a handgun toward Sergeant Kent, and the officers who were on the stairs. Sergeant Kent immediately discharged his firearm, striking the suspect and saving the victim from further injury or even death. During this highly stressful encounter, Sergeant Drew Kent remained laser-focused and continued to direct and coordinate critical tasks for additional officers responding to this scene. Officers Fowl, Petrus, Ottenbright, Armstrong, Fitzko, D'Angelo, and Detective Don Lindemuth immediately entered the basement and began assisting the female victim, carrying her up the basement steps. The victim was turned over to the Second Alarmers ambulance squad, who was already staged in the area, treating 2 other women who had also been stabbed. Second Alarmers Lieutenant Paramedic Josh Dowd coordinated the response for additional medics as Deputy Chief Ken Davidson and Chief John Klink responded to the scene. Officers Petrus, Fowl, Armstrong, and Bullock then began CPR on our victim or suspect who had been shot in the basement. Detective Lindemuth and Officer Ottenbright secured the scene for detectives and coordinated the response of our mutual aid partners from Upper Moreland Police, Jenkintown Police, Cheltenham Police, who were incredible in coming, because during this day, this Sergeant, Drew Kent, was not only the main guy going into this residence, but he also had the responsibility of supervising the other 10 officers and keeping the street operational. So thankfully, our partners showed up, took control of the scene, and assisted with our other calls for service. As you know, things don't shut down because of this critical event. Sergeant Kent's quick response, leadership, and sound tactics combined with the performance of all of the officers on scene was critical to saving the lives of these victims of domestic violence. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's been only few times in the history of our department that we issued a commendation, Class 1 for valor. And this is a blue bar that goes on the uniform. And right now I want to give this to Nicole, Sergeant Kent's wife, for her to pin this on above his badge. And please join me in congratulating him. Together, these officers displayed courage and determination, and their coordinated response was nothing short of heroic, earning them a Class 3 and Class 4 letters of commendation. And I'd like to call up Officers Pat Fowl and Officers Chris Petros, who also earned the bars. The suspect here, who had a very violent criminal history to include assaults on other women, assaults on police officers, and felony robberies, burglaries, was intent on seriously injuring and even possibly killing these defenseless victims. Among them, to my right, is a social worker who was simply visiting the house, not simply, but visiting the house for autistic support to take care of one of the children who was living there. Victims of domestic violence are sometimes forgotten. So this is a little unusual for us to bring the victims in today, but we wanted to change that here tonight by bringing them in because they have been so brave and resilient. So please join me in recognizing Alicia Levy, Elena Guzman, Heather Levy, ladies and gentlemen, please stand up, and Sharday Panic. If I could ask Commissioner DiPlacido and Commissioner Lori Schreiber to come down, we would invite them to present.
I'd like to read out this first certificate to Alicia. Alicia, this is a certificate of bravery in recognition of your selfless act of courage and heroic actions taken to protect others. Thank you so much. This is awarded on the 8th day of November today, and it's signed by our chief, Patrick Malloy.
Thank you.
Elena. Again, this is a certificate of bravery in recognition of your selfless act of courage and heroic actions taken to protect others. Signed by Patrick, Chief Patrick Malloy. Thank you so much.
These victims here has displayed an extraordinary courage on the scene and in the aftermath. The invisible wounds of post-traumatic stress disorder, we see that sometimes in our business with rescue, first responders, and others in the military. And sometimes this goes on daily, and it could go on for years. So we realized that, and we thought it was really important to support them. But what's really unusual with this case, I was contacted by one of the victims, and she had asked me, is it okay to come in to listen to the 911 tapes and to listen to our dispatch? And some of them we did not want to play here because they were very difficult for us to even listen to a second time. But Sergeant Kent, I told her we could not do that, but I said I'm going to talk to Sergeant Kent, who on his own time volunteered to sit with one of our victims, and on 2 occasions at this point, working with her, allowing her to listen to some of the audio dispatch and also the 911 call. So that's just a testament to the extraordinary commitment that Sergeant Kent had to the victims. We know that helps us heal, and it also helps our victims heal, because this was a very violent scene, and there is never a joy in taking a life. We know that. We wish, as many cases that we handle, that we're able to preserve a life, but clearly in this case, the actions of the sergeant and others here saved a life. Had he not acted the way he did, there is no question the assault would have continued, and God knows what would have happened. So also tonight, and we don't usually do this, but we have the second alarmers here, and we did, if Public Safety Chair Lori Schreiber can come back again, I'm sorry, but we would like to present one plaque, and I'd ask Chief John Klink if he's here. If not, we have Assistant Chief Ken Davidson, after he testified last weekend. I think he is the CEO of the second alarmers. If he could come up so we can present a plaque to both of you guys. Then can we get one group shot with all of them up here? Yeah.
This is to the Second Alarmers Rescue Squad with certificate of appreciation for performing outstanding service by rendering critical first aid and saving innocent lives during a violent domestic with multiple victims on March 4th, 2018. Am I giving this to you?
All right. I would like Officers Bullock, Officers D'Angelo, and Detective Don Lindemuth, could you please come up? We're going to present your final certificates here. And if I could, before we adjourn, if I can get all of the officers after this and the victims together with second alarmers, and President Luker, if you would come down, if we could have a photo with you and the Public Safety Director, that would be great. Thank you.
Their Class 4 award commendations for performance, they all say the same thing, so we're just going to go through each one. Except, okay.
You can just...
Officer Daniel Bullock. Officer Adrian Chahelsky D'Angelo. Did I get it? Thank you. Thank you, John.
And Detective.
Officer, Detective, we have a
Yeah.
little mistake, we'll correct that. Detective Donald Lindemuth.
That's great. Then set up one picture up here, get everybody up here. Like that? We get everybody up in one picture. If we can have the President of the Board and Public Safety Director. And again, you know, these things don't happen by accident. A lot of good training, a lot of support from the community and the second alarmers. If the second alarmers could come up for this photo, if they're not gone already, they may be. But again, this is a team effort, and it would not happen without all of our supporting law enforcement and second alarmers.
Are you getting in there? And you want the camera that yeah, yeah, Don, can you? Yeah.
Yeah, you guys got to turn. There you go.
Yep, perfect. Good. Let's rearrange this. You got it. John, move over some and come forward. This way. Yep.
We're gonna get closer. Yeah. You got him? If everyone could get a little bit closer. I know it's warm in here. Get a little closer. I got it right here. Right. That's perfect. Mr. Luker, ready? 1, 2, 3. You get it there, Michael?
Yep.
You good?
Yeah, we got it.
We're good. Thank you.